What's up, YouTube? So today we're talking about plyometrics. Now, plyometrics are a game changer. Whether you just want to get more explosive, you want to get faster in track, you want to jump higher for basketball, plyometrics cover all these things. And today we're going to talk about it. The history, how to use them in your program, what exactly they are, and how they can benefit you so you can become more explosive in your respective event. So let's check it out. So first, we need to talk about what the heck is a plyometric. So real quick, here we go is a quick description of what a plyometric is. Plyometrics are exercises that boost your ability to produce force quickly, translating strength into dynamic, sport-specific movements. Who's the genius that is behind it? So, real quick, I'm gonna read some here. So, to understand plyometrics, of course, you need a quick history. So, Fred Wilt, an American track coach, is one who is considered to be the founder of plyometrics. But then there's another guy from the Soviet Union, can't even pronounce his name, but I'm gonna put his name right here. He is known as the father of plyometrics, and he came up with a method called the shock method. And so the shock method is you wanna shock the body and the nervous system to react quickly as if you're reacting to something. So for example, a death drop jump where you jump from a box and land will be an example of a shock method, because now your body has to react really quickly to make sure you don't break your leg and then relax, okay? And so that's the eccentric, concentric we talk about with different muscle groups and things like that. But the point being, the shock method, founded by this guy, put his name right here, okay? Back in 1960s. So high impact exercises like death jumps, like I mentioned, trigger explosive muscle responses, another key factor in plyometrics and getting the most out of your plyometrics. So you have some plyometrics where you just jump on a box, which would not be considered a shock method, but jumping off a box and then having to jump and rebound would be an example of a shock method. So think of sprinting, think of jumping, cutting on the field, right? Plyometrics bridge the gap between that strength and the explosiveness, right? And being able to express that effectively in your respective event. So if you can squat a lot, but can't sprint very fast, a plyometric is the bridge that helps you take that strength, combine it with the speed and explosiveness to make it one cohesive group that will help you perform better in your respective event. So additionally, plyometrics also help with your rate of force development. So how fast can you generate power is one. How well you can decelerate, which is what we call the eccentric muscle group, how well you can decelerate. Critical for explosive actions. Like I said, jumping, dunking the basketball, sprinting would be another example of plyometrics that are very demanding, high velocity, high demand, and are great for getting more explosive and faster. So here's the secret sauce. And then something else I want to harp on is every time you jump, it's not a plyometric. So for example, like I mentioned, the box jump wouldn't be considered a plyometric because there is no eccentric loading, okay? So eccentric just means like your body's ability to slow down. So if you were to jump and then land, the landing would be the eccentric part of the or of your muscle activation. So when you do a box jump, that landing is reduced eccentrically because you are landing on top of a box. So instead of you jumping up and then having to absorb your landing, now you're jumping on a box and now your landing is softened, or the eccentric phase is softened, right? So things like that aren't considered plyometrics. They're more so just considered jump training. So what makes a true plyometric is the eccentric plus the concentric loading, what we call the stretch and shortening, and how fast that happens. So here is an example of a regular box jump. You notice it's only the concentric motion where you just explode out and jump. Versus on the other hand, we have a death drop jump where you're falling, you're absorbing the contact, and that absorption is called the eccentric, which is vitally important when we're talking about plyometrics because our body is strongest in this eccentric loading phase. And so if we can strengthen this, it will give us more power output through our concentric, or the extending of our legs. So that's why box jumps aren't so much considered a plyometrics compared to death drop jumps, because when you drop off a box, you first have to absorb the landing, which is that quick elastic flex and release, and then you have to release that force back into the ground to again jump again. So it's very reflexive, very dynamic in nature, and these are the true plyometrics we talk about that bridge the gap between your strength and your speed to help you get faster and better express your strength in your respective event or sport. So let's get back to the Russian guy with the shock method. Again, I'm gonna put his name here because it's hard to say, but so his shock method, he just used gravity as a way to excite the nervous system and get a quick reactive response from our body's muscles and from through the eccentric phase. So of course, you don't want to overdo it. There is such thing as jumping too high off of a box and our body not being able to absorb that force correctly. But when used in the correct context, it is fantastic for increasing that explosiveness that we achieve in basketball, football, or whatever your sport is. So let me see. So real quick, so it says jumps can be extensive, low intensity, higher volume, like rudiment hops or submaximal bounds, or it can be higher intensity, like depth drop jumps or single leg speed bounds, things of this nature that have a very violent movement in nature, where you have to absorb and exert energy very fast, very quick, and that is the rapid force production and stiffness reactivity adaptations that we aim to achieve when we do things like plyometrics and other violent movements to help us better express our capacity and athleticism. So yeah, so that is the shock method. So again, you can't overdo it. You don't want to overdo it. But the intense approach is what makes plyometrics so effective for building explosive power, because when you factor in falling, you're really at the mercy of gravity, versus like a box jump, for example, you know exactly where you're going and how much force to put into the ground. So Wysowski, I'm saying his name wrong, but he coined the shock method. And so today we use different variations of this, but ultimately they're all derived or they all have the purpose of shocking the nervous system to react violently, contract, release energy so that it's expressed as explosiveness to us. So how can you reap the benefits of these plyometrics, and how would you factor it into your training cycles and use it specifically for whatever sports you are in favor of? So it mentions that for beginners, you want to cycle it, and you don't want to start with a depth drop jump right away for a beginner. Okay, so you would start with baby hops, maybe pogos off 2 feet, some couple of sprint drills. But the point is that you want to get them ready for the maximum loads by doing sub-maximal exercises. So instead of doing a depth drop jump, you would just have them maybe do baby pogos or jump high, knee tuck jumps, or other variations of jumping and landing to get them ready for the full-on just land and jump. Okay. Another way too is sprinting is a plyometric, and you need to balance your jumping and sprinting volume when you're including these in your program. And this is why sprinting is the ultimate exercise for developing explosiveness, because it combines so many factors into one, and it is high velocity, high impact, and you can't get that with any other exercise but sprinting. And typically for 50 or 100 for beginners, additionally too, so when you're just starting out, it's good to go on softer surfaces to begin with before increasing to harder surfaces. Now, the reason you want softer, or the reason behind doing plyometric on softer surfaces, is because it is less demanding on the body, and the ground contact times tend to be longer because you don't get as much reflexive energy coming back to you through softer surfaces. So if you ever try to jump in sand, you'll notice that it's really easy on the joints. When you try to jump, you don't jump very high, or when you land, it's not that tough of a landing. Versus if you're on concrete, again, you feel it more, but you get more return. So you also need to factor that in when you're building your plyometric program, your sprint program. Make sure you factor in also like what surface you're landing on. Beginner, more advanced. Beginner would be on a softer surface. More advanced would be on harder surfaces. And even doing the exercises like the speed bounds, the tuck jumps, things like that, doing them on concrete versus doing it on a softer surface can make all the difference in how much return you get, but if you're able to stay healthy while including this in your program. So to summarize it all up, you want to progress slowly. Check your surfaces. If it's tough surface or if it's on grass, monitor your volume so you're not doing too much. Again, plyometrics are very demanding on the body. That's why they work. But again, you can't overdo it if you are not monitoring how much volume or how much jumping, how much ground contact times you are accumulating during a session. So that's something to keep in mind. And then focus on proper execution. So there is wrong ways to do plyometrics. And if you end up having, for example, shin splints or some type of knee pain when you first start out, it's probably because you're not landing correctly under your center of mass to properly absorb the force and return the force. So that's also something to consider. Now, plyometrics are a powerful tool, and they're only effective when they're dosed right and executed well. So start small, build your base, and watch your athleticism skyrocket. quite literally. So today we took a deep dive into plyometrics. If you found that useful, smash the like button. I'm gonna be creating content every day, so just tap in with me. If you have a suggestion for a video, let me know, and I'll go ahead and do some research on it and post about it. So check out on the next one. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Peace. Stay fast.